Hello, welcome to this presentation Getting Started with Infraworks 360 REST API. My name is Augusto Gonçalves and I'm a developer consultant at Autodesk Developer Network. So let's get started showing the product. How to create a new model using Infraworks 360. We have a feature called Model Builder, which allows us to create a new model using the database hosted on Infraworks server. Then we can synchronize back between the desktop and the server. Let's see how that works on a quick demonstration. So let me switch back to Infraworks and I have this feature, Model Builder. I can click in here and select a city where I want to create this model. Let's say I want to create a model at Manchester. We'll zoom in and let me just zoom in to a more specific area. Let's say I want to create a model in here. I want to select an area, let's say this area. Not getting a very big area, just a small one. And I will say that this is the Autodesk Manchester office and create this model. The model will be created back on the server and that will take up to 15 minutes to be created. When the model is created, I will receive an email saying the model is ready for download. So let me close here and wait a few more moments for this email to come. So here we have the email saying the model is ready, and we can see the information about the model, and I can just refresh to see the email, to see the model, and then I can click on it to open, but to open I need to download it locally. When the model is downloaded, I keep a local copy of this model and I can make changes and browse through this model. When I make any change, I can then synchronize back to the server. So that will take a few more moments to download, and now I can open the model. As you can see, this is a very small one with just a few buildings. I have one building here and another building here. And if I click on the properties, I can see some information. I can also check for the properties of this specific building, and I can see, for instance, that this building is named Autodesk and this building here is named Pandora Building. When I click on Synchronize, the information that I changed locally will be pushed back to the server. So that will be the synchronization that can be done. I'm not going to synchronize here because it will take a few moments. So this is not part of what I want to show you guys here. So let me just close this and go back to my presentation. So what I want to show you is the API. So let's start with the architecture of this API. The Infraworks API is hosted on the server, and I can call this API using REST, which is the right side of this slide. Also note that the desktop and the iPad version will connect to the same database hosted on Infraworks server, but the API will not be calling or requesting any data from the desktop or the iPad. The REST API can only call the Infraworks server, which means I can only see the data that is hosted on the server. The API works directly with the Infraworks 360 server. It uses REST and JSON approach, which means that is independent of programming languages. Right now we can make read-only calls using GET method. So the main idea here is to show you a sample, how to integrate the REST API with other APIs. So the main idea is, how can we create a web app browser based that reads models data from Infraworks 360 and connect with other internet providers, in this case FourSquare venues and Google Maps, and I want to show that information to the user. So this is the main goal of this example. So what do we need to prepare this example? Of course, we need Infraworks 360 installed with a model created. I cannot read data from a model if there is no model. Then I need a development environment. In this case, I prefer to use Visual Studio because I use that to create applications for Autodesk products with .NET, and I'm also using that to create a ASP.NET API application. One good suggestion to work with ASP.NET is to install the Web Essential Toolkit, which is a toolkit available for Visual Studio that allow you to work better with web languages. Also, I strongly recommend you to download the Firebug for Firefox, which is a plugin for Firefox that allows us to inspect and debug client browser-side code. Finally, there is a JSON viewer for Chrome. This is not required, but it's interesting to see JSON data that you can read from the internet, so that's useful. We don't want to get started from zero, so let's get some libraries available on the web. First, we have an ADN DevTech folder on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/ADN DevTech, you can get a lot of samples. There is a Autodesk OF sample and also an Infraworks API samples. We need those two samples to create this model. The OF will be the authentication, allow us to access Autodesk servers, and the Infraworks API sample will contain the whole model to allow us read information from that server. If we go to this web page that is right here, we can get the samples and we can find the Autodesk OF samples. In this case, we are looking for a very specific one. We want the ASP.NET sample because there are some other samples for PHP, for instance, but in this case I want the OF sample. Also, we want the Infraworks API sample. On both cases, we just go to download zip and we can get the source code. Second, to read REST from the web, you can do it yourself, but you can also use the library available on the REST sharp sample. It's available on that link you see on screen. That's very interesting to use. Also, we want the Newton soft JSON on Nugget. It's available for us to read and deserialize JSON responses. When we get a response from the server, we need to understand and deserialize this into objects, so that library will allow us to do it. Finally, as this sample will connect us to FourSquare, we need an API to read FourSquare. Again, we can do that with REST calls, but it's not easy. If we have a sample like this sharp square, it just makes life easier. Also, we need the jQuery, which is a framework for JavaScript, which contains a lot of pre-implemented methods to make JavaScript calls. In our case, we are going to make AJAX calls back to the server, and that's very much easier with just this jQuery library. So here we have the main architecture of this sample. As I'm going to connect Infraworks with some other service, we need to design the architecture for this sample. So the main idea is that we are going to have a client browser application mainly that will, on this client browser, we are going to install the Firebug to debug our code. And we are going to use the jQuery to make calls to the server we are going to create. In this case, I'm going to create an ASP.NET server that will host most of the logic of this sample. Also, it's very important to keep our keys and secret in a secure location. In our case, I'm going to maintain those keys and secret on the ASP.NET code, which the user that is using the sample cannot see. So we are hiding that information from the user. This ASP.NET will call Infraworks server and get data using the key and secret. Also, it will also call the FourSquare server to get information. When everything is done here, we are going to also call Google Maps API to get some maps. In this case, it's not required to have an ASP.NET in the middle because there is no key involved in this specific case. So that call will be done from the client on Firefox. So let's see a demonstration of this. So here I have my Visual Studio. I have the OF sample. I also have the ADN Infraworks sample. They are both from GitHub, and the rest Sharp sample, FourSquare sample. I haven't made a lot of changes on this Infraworks service because this is just the base model, but I've made a lot of changes on this one, the OF sample. The basic one comes only with this default file. So I have created another one, Infraworks 360 demonstration ASP, and also some methods. The methods is the one that will make the interception between the client and the server. And the demo is just the main page, the landing page. So you can see here, this is just the landing page. This landing page contains a lot of code on JavaScript because the main landing page, it has a reference to jQuery and the Infraworks JavaScript. This Infraworks JavaScript is a file that I have created for this sample just to make some basic calls. So there are a few basic calls here. Is logged, get models, get a specific model, get roads, get buildings, and you can see that all the calls are made to this ASMX file, which is the file that make the connections back to the server. So methods. I have put a few breakpoints so you can see this code running. And the OF contains most of the code for the authentication. So let's see this code running on Firefox. In this case, I'm going to enable the Firebug. So let's see the console with the Firebug. To get started, I have to log in with my Autodesk account. This account is not the developer account, but the user account. The user is the user who created all the models on Infraworks. So now I'm reading models from the server. As you can see, the first call was isLogged. It took it 2 milliseconds, and the second call was get models, which took 7 seconds. This is expected because the Infraworks right now is running on dev production environment, and this dev production environment is not as fast as the actual production environment. So that's why it's taking that long to make calls for Infraworks. As you can see, I have 4 models. The first 3 models were models that are created as samples, and the third one is the model that I have created here, Autodesk Manchester Office. When I click here, again, I'm going to get the buildings of this model, and I'm going to get object of class building, and I'm going to return them. Let me disable this breakpoint and continue. So it's getting all the models. Again, isLogged took it a few seconds, and the get building is taking longer. Usually when we create a new model, we have this accepted code here. It's not okay, it's just accepted. It means that the model was created back on the server, but it's not yet ready to open from the API. So that's why it's returning accepted. So the model is still open on server. Please try again later. So now I have the list of the buildings of this model. As you can see, I have 6 buildings, and I'm not reading the names yet. That's because to read each name I have to make a single call to the server. So that's why I'm just making the call to get the name when I mouse over this specific item. So when I click on this, on I mouse over this specific item, I'm going to get the name. A few of those buildings are not don't have a name on the model. That's why it's showing as not defined. If I mouse over them all, I'll get all the calls. As you can see here at the bottom, I'm getting the name of all those buildings. So I have one building called Autodesk and a few more buildings with no name defined on them. So the next stage is to get the information from FourSquare of that specific building. So let me start with this Autodesk building. So if I click here, I'm going to get the venues from FourSquare with information about that. The first step is to get the building from Infraworks again. So I'm getting the building information from Infraworks, and as this building is a polygon, I'm going to get the average point XY of this building. This is just to make life easier, so I'm getting just the center point or average point of this building, and then I'm going to connect to FourSquare, passing that information, this average latitude and longitude, to get venues around this location. So let me disable those breakpoints and see how that works. So around that building we can see a few venues from FourSquare. I can see that is an Autodesk venue 58 meters, a Bluebeam software venue 122 meters. So let me try this first one. I know that's the correct one. Now I can see the map. If I zoom in, I mouse over here, I can see that this is the location from FourSquare and this is the location from Infraworks. If I try a building that I don't know the name, let's try this one, I'll get the venues again, and the list of venues will show, for instance, this We Play School. Let me try this one, 59 meters. If I zoom in on the map, I can see that this is the Infraworks coordinate and this is the FourSquare coordinate of this same location. It may be this one, or it may be this another one. It's most likely the We Play School. That's it. Thank you for watching. The sample will be available with this recording.